All right, I want to welcome everybody to the Hire Talents podcast, optimizing the hiring process for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. And we have like the perfect guest today, Richard Shaw from Unleashed CEO. And, he's got an interesting story, probably not unlike many of our stories. He found himself running two businesses and, it nearly killed him. And that inspired him to create an Unleashed CEO, with has a deep emphasis on recruiting and training and developing leadership teams, so that as leaders we can spend more time on working on our businesses and versus in the businesses, and freeing up our time so that we can take back our personal lives and even just some of our professional ambitions, so that we can do more with those. And so I think that's a great message. I think many of us think about that and are contemplating that or struggling with working too much, right? So thank you for being here, Richard. Tell us about this journey that you were on.
Yeah, well, Fletcher, it's a pleasure to be here. And there's nobody I'd rather be hanging out with than other fellow entrepreneurs who have been through the same crises, right? We always, as entrepreneurs, love to put a great veneer on everything. It's part of our job, right, to market and sell our companies. But there are very few spaces, and I'm thankful to you and your community for creating those, where you talk about the issues, right, where you talk about the hard stuff. And man, my story essentially, as you put it so well, I found myself literally curled up in a fetal position in the corner in my office, crying out to God for help, and literally like
goosebumps,
thinking I was going to die. When I was two companies in at the time, I'd started some things successfully, and in my kind of naivety and entrepreneurial overconfidence, you could say, I thought I could do anything. And so, stepped into a new realm, thought, handling, hey, if one business is great, why not two? And was in my first year of marriage at the time. And honestly, man, just did it all wrong. Hired people who betrayed us and stabbed us in the back, brought on angel investors who weren't even at all aligned with our vision, and were constantly just a huge source of stress at kind of the leadership and board level of the company. We literally had, we got sued. We got defrauded by the state government. We had, a actual like hailstorm come through and do like massive damage to our properties that the insurance company didn't want to pay. And all of this kind of hit at one time. And I remember literally, man, just being in that moment, questioning whether I was actually an entrepreneur or whether I just faked it. Right. I was like, man, I just faked it on, the backs of my charisma. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do anything. And this whole thing is about to implode, and, I'm going to be such a failure, right? I'm going to look like such a failure. And, for me, as dramatic as that moment was, it was also a really pivotal moment, because I had to take real stock for the first time in my entrepreneurial journey of my weaknesses, right? The areas I wasn't strong.
It's humbling, right?
What's that?
It's humbling, right? You get to a point, right, where, you've built something that's so great, right? But then you have these humbling experiences that knock you back, right? 3, 5, 10 steps. And then, takes kind of the wind out of your sail, and that ego that you've built up, with all the success and momentum. And then next thing you know, you're like questioning yourself, as you said, right? I think many of us have been there, right?
100%, man. Yeah. And humbling is a great word for it. And that's exactly how it felt. And I think I was just talking to an entrepreneur earlier today, where it's like, everyone reaches a point in their journey where they have to come face to face with the reality of their weaknesses. And in those moments, you either kind of choose to just ignore it and not face it and just continue to pretend like you're Superman, or you face it head on, look the devil in the eyes, and admit, like, I'm not good at everything. Like, I don't actually have everything this company needs to succeed. And that's when most entrepreneurs actually come to this pivotal moment of realizing, like, I need to build a team that is strong where I'm weak, right? And not just at the tactical level, as you and I were talking about before the interview, but at a leadership and management level of the company. And a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that because, quite frankly, they've never done it. It's actually in some ways easier to replace themselves with hands in the business, people who do the work, than it is to replace brain power, which is people who actually think and delegate and lead and manage.
And that's, I think, an interesting topic. I mean, we spent a lot of time on this podcast and talking a lot about those kind of frontline, tactical doer type people. And obviously those people are critical and very important to our business, and we got to get those right. But, it's beginning to bring in leadership, type folks who are going to think at that higher level a little more strategically, and also have to be aligned, right, with us and our vision for the companies, because then otherwise, lots of challenges there, I think, is something that a lot of us find ourselves thinking about, but and is a very, very challenging. And I've seen plenty of entrepreneurs really fail at that, for a variety of different reasons, and missing the mark ultimately in those key hires. But so how does you come to this like humbling point where everything's sort of like crashing down around you a bit, right? And you obviously decide to recognize the challenge and not ignore it, or not dismiss it as some sort of fluke. You're gonna fix it, right? How does that evolve for you then?
Great question. Yeah. So for me, in that case, there was a couple key things that I'm really thankful that I did in that moment, right? One was I got essentially an outside board of advisors to come and look at what I was doing, right? And I think this is one of the pieces of the entrepreneurial team that doesn't get talked about enough, is we talk a lot about getting help on the doing side, but getting help on the thinking side, the brain side, is so key. And so that can look like hiring people internally. But for me, the first step was just getting some wise, seasoned business people and actually being vulnerable enough to expose my weaknesses to them and go, what am I doing wrong? Right.
And that's actually easier said than done, I think, right? I mean, many of these people, for very little money or no money, will volunteer to be a part of that, I would assume, right?
Yeah. And I would say this, to an entrepreneur who at least has, experienced some level of success, it may be something you have to invest in. I know, entrepreneurs who pay people to be on their board. But it's other people, they pay coaches or advisors or, consultants. And we obviously come alongside of our clients somewhat in that capacity, more so on the recruiting side. But, I just always tell that part of the story to say vulnerably, for me, it started with like actually being willing to let go of some control and some ego, as you said, and acknowledge like, I need help to take this thing to the next level. And in my case, to actually bring it back out of the red into the black. And I'm thankful that because we brought in some wise advisors and because we brought in some skilled team members who were strong where I was weak, that freed me up to actually go fix some of our more revenue related problems and know that the operational side of the business was handled correctly. And as a result, we brought it out of the red back into the black. I actually ended up exiting that company and selling it to one of the high, key members of the leadership team that we'd assembled, and was able to kind of move on to my next venture, which was actually far more aligned with my long-term vision, but that's a whole other conversation we could have. And so
what was the first business that
first business was I owned a wealth management and financial services company. We did kind of everything on the investing and financial services side, very kind of general market. And then because we experienced a lot of success with that company and had a lot of relationship with higher level investors, we started a real estate investment trust. So our REIT, because a lot of our clients were interested in getting into real estate or did have real estate. We opened up opportunity for investment, and that was, as I joke with people, the business that almost killed me. But
so you had a major a weather related event, and that doesn't always bode well for real estate. I imagine it must have been a trying time there. So that's interesting. I mean, I like the board advisor thing, and we could talk about forever. I think it's, even in the paid scenarios, usually it's really not that expensive. I mean, you could for a couple grand or $5,000 a year, you could probably have a solid board member, and you put together 3 or 4 or 5 of those people. I mean, it's a very nominal cost for being able to bring in that brain power, right? I think a really smart move, and hopefully if you use it right, for great for accountability too, right? Not just for learning. But so I think that's an interesting twist there. But who was your first key hire? I guess once you kind of settled and you sort of trying to figure this out, who was your first key hire?
Yeah. So in that company, for me, I've always found that there's two things to consider, right? There's the profile of the person that you need, and then there's what role do they play on the team in that season.
Yeah.
And I think for entrepreneurial companies, it's even more important to hire for the type of people you need than it is to strictly hire for the role that you need. And let me explain why I think
Yeah.
that's actually important.
Yeah. Explain the difference. When you start talking about
Yeah.
type versus role, what are you getting at?
Yeah. And I would even say the profile of the person. So for me, as an entrepreneur, my first hire is always going to be somebody who I describe as the yin to my yang. Okay.
Yeah.
So I literally functionally just need someone at a peer level in the business, even if they're not an equity owner, who is good at the things I'm bad at. So, and I know what those are. I'm self-aware about financial management, not good at it. Just not good at it.
Yeah. Don't like doing bookkeeping.
Yeah. Yeah. Communication platforms, email, like just literally getting back to everyone in a timely, very thorough way. Not good at it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just not good at it. I can really focus on it. But
one phrase responses.
Yeah. Right. That's like entrepreneur 101, right? You just speed over everything.
Yeah.
Things like, delegation, project management, not that great at it.
Yeah.
Just not, right? Put me in front of a camera, I can talk all day, but ask me to build a workflow for someone and assign all of the related tasks and milestones and, have a Gantt chart associated with it.
And QA it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, it's always been about, like, I think in the smarter companies that I founded, let's say the last couple, I've always looked for somebody who was the yin to my yang. And actually that can vary a little bit based on your entrepreneurial profile, right? Some people are really great at financial management. We have clients who I would describe as very far on the entrepreneurial spectrum, very far on the visionary spectrum, however you want to say it. And they're great with finances and they actually love to do it. And in that case, I'm like, more power to you, right? You don't need a CFO, but man, they hate team management, operations, like that kind of stuff. They might need a great COO, right? And so I would say for me, it's first defining your profile versus the profile of the person who complements that, the yin to your yang, so to speak. And in most cases for me, that would actually be my first hire. Now that can be positioned as a lot of different roles in the company. That can be positioned as an executive administrator, depending on the scale of the company. It can be positioned as an operations manager, a COO.
And I think the common thread, right, is most entrepreneurs definitely fall into that visionary side. I mean, some are more tactical or operationally minded, obviously, than others, but they're still usually in that visionary mode almost always. And as EOS people out there, right, thinking of the integrator, right? And I think you're using that language here, right? And that is, I think you're alluding to, doesn't have to be a COO. It could just be a great executive admin, right? It's funny. I just started working with a new client who's in the wealth management world too, but she's more of an advisor coach. But she's like, I need to hire an executive implementer, and I love that. I never even thought of that title, but I thought, I was like, well, that's just a great way to describe an executive assistant who's high level. I mean, we're not talking just somebody answering the phones here, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think man, that comes back to too, like, behavioral flexibility, I think, is key at leadership team hires. You want people who are skilled, they're entrepreneurial in the sense that they're problem solvers at their core. They're not just specialists. They're adaptive problem solvers, but they're not an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the hard part. You actually, I caution entrepreneurs all the time.
They're the ones that aren't willing to take the risk, right? I mean, like, as an entrepreneur, inherently, you've got some, ability to tolerate risk, right? And, if you got a great, executor or implementer, type, right? Those people typically are much less risk adverse, right? Just by their nature, and that's what makes them good at it. And the yin to your yang, right, is that complement, I think. So I think you're hitting it really well. I like this. So, I mean, what's just from a tactical standpoint, I think what I'm hearing you saying, and I think this is spot on, is you need to sit down and just take stock of your own kind of places where you are most comfortable, things that you're really good at, things that are on your plate. I think of like Scaling Up does this in their people section, right? That you list out all the different responsibilities in the company, and as an entrepreneur, you're usually wearing tons of different hats. So maybe you list those hats that you're wearing, and then you list the ones that you like. This is the one that you like doing. This is the ones you're good at doing. And then start figuring out which ones you don't like doing, which ones are, not worth your time. Maybe, I mean, it could be something you like doing, like bookkeeping, but it's not worth your time too, right? I mean, but you start to kind of like categorize it a little bit, I think, right? Is that kind of where you go with this?
Yeah, and I'm not sure the Scaling Up one. I have huge respect for their community as well as the EOS community. We're collaborators with them, but I'm not familiar with that exact exercise. But what I even have told entrepreneurs to do is literally just take a sheet of paper, right, and act like you're playing tic-tac-toe, right? Draw 4 quadrants, right?
Yeah.
Draw a line down the middle, draw a line down the center, and then really the 4 quadrants for me, the two, I guess if you're using the scientific term, I think it's the Y and the X axis of that is, do you love it or do you hate it? That's on the far end, love it or hate it. And then are you great at it or are you not great at it? Right?
Yeah. Because you love it, and if you're not good at it, then maybe you should outsource. You should find somebody.
Yeah, you probably should. And that's where one of those quadrants is what I call your superpower as an entrepreneur. And those are the things you love to do and you're great at them. And to the extent an entrepreneur is focused on their superpower, businesses explode. I've watched this time and time again with our clients, where when the entrepreneur 80% of their time is focused on what they love to do and are great at, typically the business is roaring. They're taking off. The challenge is most entrepreneurs I sit down with are actually in the bottom 2 quadrants, meaning they're spending time doing things that they don't love and are good at.
Not good at.
Things they don't love and they're not good at.
Yeah. Definitely got to solve those
ones. That is
ones.
called hell for an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I think we've all been there at some point. I mean that in your entrepreneurial journey, you have filled all of those roles, have done all of them, I would assume. We've all, and the question is, are you stuck in the things that you don't like and that you're not good at, or you don't like, maybe second best, second worst. But if you're stuck in those, right, it's time, it's really got to figure out how to get out of that. And I think it's interesting you point out the superpower, right? When the entrepreneur is focused on their superpower, the business explodes. And I think, probably you're going to get to this point, but when you put people into roles that allow them to focus on their superpower, they succeed too, right?
100%. And the company grows as a result of that too, right?
Exactly.
Because it's not just that the functions the entrepreneur is great at, have to be strong for the business to grow. All the major functions, if you want your company to grow and be healthy, all the major functions need to be strong.
Yep.
And that's where you need people who are strong in those functions that you're not strong at.
Yeah. So once you've identified those things, then you can look at, okay, here are the things that I'm not good at, or I don't like doing, or both, right? And then then becomes the profile of the person that the first person that you need, or at least as many of those things that you can move to that person as possible. Or maybe it's multiple, right, people. But
yeah. And I would say it depends too. Like, some entrepreneurs maybe listening to this podcast, they're like, well, I have a leadership team, or maybe I don't have every member, but I still feel like I'm doing a lot of things I don't love and I'm not good at. And that's where I would, kind of say, it really is important to look at what is the business, what does the leadership and management team of the company need to be to operate without you in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
Right. The frame I try to set for entrepreneurs is like, if 100% of your time was focused on growth in the future, who would you need in place? And who would you actually need? Not just what you can afford. Who would you need at a leadership and management level to actually execute the day-to-day and move the strategy and vision of the business forward? And once we've answered that, you may, as you said earlier, have to sit in one of those seats, or you may have a hat or two that you sit in, but then you also know who you need additionally. And that might not be one person. in some cases. But a lot of entrepreneurs listening to this today could literally double or triple their business, I truly believe, over the next year, rather than remaining bottlenecked, if they just got clear on what we just talked about and made that next key hire, took that brave, courageous step to focus on their strengths and delegate their constraints.
Putting that into your, your 10-year, 5-year, 3-year, 1-year, roadmap, right? Because again, it may not be feasible to just be like, oh, I'm going to put together, head of sales, head of marketing, head of ops, head of, all these different things that could get real expensive real quick, right? But I think just having that clearly identified, but I think, as you mentioned, it doesn't have to be always at that high level, right? It's going to be appropriate for the level of business and revenue and situation they're in. And it could be an executive implementer, right? Like, could be just a really strong, admin type person, right? Not doesn't have to be a COO, right? It may not be appropriate for your situation. So then that's how you begin to tackle this, I think, right? Is you can take baby steps in some senses, if appropriate, or if you're ready, go for it. Hire the CFO. I love it. So, okay, so now you've identified, what it is, the holes and the gaps and the profile of the yin to your yang. Now, how do you execute?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. And, you guys are recruiting experts as well. And I love that we're having this conversation today, because I was thinking beforehand, what a perfect pairing, as you said in the beginning, because I always talk about recruiting a leadership team, an executive team, management team, whatever you want to call it, that there's an art and a science to it. And it's an art and it's a science. And for us, what I've found is not a lot of people talk about the art side well. There's a lot out there about the science side. Although what I think is so cool is what you guys are doing with your proprietary what you guys are doing with your assessments is revolutionary, right? There's a scientific piece to all of this where it's like, we need to filter candidates correctly. We need to make sure we end up with only the best. But my question to a lot of entrepreneurs is, how do you know you're attracting the right people into your scientific hiring process in the first place?
Mm-hmm. So starting with attraction. Yeah. How do you attract those ideal people, these key roles, right? Well, I think that is the $1 million question today, particularly. COVID has had this unusual effect on just shrinking or just causing the talent market to go totally bonkers in all different ways. Not only is unemployment at really all-time lows, back to pre-COVID numbers, which, pre-COVID, we were already at what I would call full employment, right? Really, there was nobody unemployed. You're at 4%. That's a normal, fully employed workforce, for our country, basically. But then we're back to those kind of numbers, but you've also dealing with these great resignations. You've got, an exponential, everybody's and their mother's trying to hire now, or particularly in the beginning of the year, but it hasn't really changed, right? So there's huge demand influx, right? But there's also this other interesting thing with the great resignation. So there's a lot of tenured, talented people who are leaving. So there's actually, as much as there's a demand supply pressure on the supply of talent, there's also actually this hidden supply of talent that
100%
is out there, these guys right now.
This is something, Fletcher, I'm so glad you brought up, man, because I during COVID, I understand we had a lot of empathy. We had clients who were in very much like retail and kind of those entry level positions who were really hurting. And I have a ton of anybody who's listening who's facing that. If you're in skilled trades, I get it. There's a ton of challenges you guys are facing, and I have nothing but the utmost empathy. But it drove me nuts when I would talk to leaders, and all they would talk about was the hiring problems and not the massive hiring opportunity that existed. Because
especially right now,
that we've seen with our clients right now is unprecedented, just absolutely unprecedented. The ability to actually be able to build a lean, affordable, highly talented, highly skilled leadership and management team for your company is absolutely unprecedented. And here's a couple factors I see driving that, right? post-COVID, people want to work remote. So if you can
Mhm.
create a culture and an environment where people can work remote, do what they need to do, have freedom and flexibility, and still make a significant impact and
Yeah.
contribution.
And I want to stop you just right
Go ahead.
there. I think you're spot on, but I can't punctuate that point right there enough. I mean, we did it. I mean, we were in the office. I was resistant to leaving the office. We did have a long-term plan to figure out how we were going to do that. And so I guess I was a little lucky, and we are in a services business. So again, I'm not dealing with skilled trades or having a physical facility in our business, right? Software and consulting and services, right? But there are so many businesses that are in this realm, like that don't have these physical facilities, or even when you do, can offer some version of this remote, flexible, more flexible working type of environment. And I'll tell you, I mean, we work with tons of professionals, CPAs and attorneys and wealth advisors and insurance people and a lot of professional service type folks. And there are a lot of the leadership there that are still resistant to making this change, especially in the smaller businesses. Forget about the big ones. I mean, we work with small and mid-sized businesses. So, under 100 employees, right? That they have, I mean, as a small business, you have the most competitive disadvantage in getting the best talent out there naturally. But this is the one thing that literally can separate you from everybody else by like a mile. Like this is the one thing that professionals, experts, highly trained, highly skilled people want more than anything. And you can give it to them.
I would say this, like, so there's two things that I've found, and I would agree with you 100%. The one thing I would even add to that, to supplement that I've seen is that these people who the market is saturated with are looking for two things right now, right? They're looking for some level of flexibility, right? Location and schedule flexibility, right? Which is the essence of remote team. It's focused on driving outcomes, not necessarily just on people sitting in an office
showing
for 8
up
hours a day or whatever, right? Just showing up. That mentality, freedom and flexibility is huge. And then the second one is impact, contribution, vision.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, man, because whenever culture goes through a crisis, there is a ton of internal processing that we do as people, right? What am I doing with my life? Right? Like what is going on? What is my life going to be about?
This job isn't giving me satisfaction anymore, right? And I mean, we spend more time at work than we do anything else. So
100%. And people have had to, because of a global pandemic, ponder death, right? More than they ever have, which I think has caused people to ask the question, what am I doing with my life?
Are you hanging out here, or are you sitting in like, a concrete jungle somewhere, unless you like concrete jungles. I mean, I don't know.
Right. And so that's where, for me, man, like, I think when we talk about the art of hiring, right? The art of hiring, I think the number one thing that we do for our clients who are entrepreneurs is we help them take what is typically as you put it, I've never heard anybody else say it other than you and me, by the way. So this is fun. We share a lot of the same language, but I have them take what I consider to be their greatest competitive disadvantage in hiring, which is that they're an entrepreneurial company, and turn it into their greatest advantage in hiring. Right. And that's the art form, is understanding how to, first of all, communicate a compelling vision and strategic plan and an opportunity for talent to get in on the ground floor of a company with practically unlimited growth potential.
It's inspiring people, because in entrepreneurial businesses, not only we can have a great vision and mission that people can get excited about. I mean, mine's hiring, helping people build amazing teams, right? I mean, it's pretty simple, and, maybe some people that's kind of boring, but that, in my opinion, has a great impact in our personal and professional lives, right? If you're working in a business with great people, then it's professionally rewarding and being challenged, and that's exciting, and I'm not bored at work, right? And so that's a win. And then I'm making, hopefully, growth in my financial and personal wealth, right? Which then helps me unlock abilities to do things for my family, right? So all of those are important. But anyways, but it is typically considered a boring subject, right? Hiring, like, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about like selling something or marketing something. That's way more exciting, right?
Well, let me tag on to that because this is something I talk about. Entrepreneurs need to take up the mantle of the promoter and salesperson of their company and
Yeah.
simply transfer that mindset from promoting and marketing to your customers to promoting and marketing to future team members,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And take that same conviction you have for your product and get convicted about the culture and the vision,
Yeah.
and then use your God-given unique ability to sell the pants off of your opportunity. Not your opportunity as in your product, the
Yeah.
opportunity to be a part of growing your business.
Yeah.
And if you take that mindset into your hiring process, you are well up the road of nailing the art of hiring, because that is
Yeah.
what the people I've consistently watched who get top tier talent in an entrepreneurial company,
They
they
sell
are
it.
obsessed with that stuff. They're a
Yeah.
zealot. They're obsessed with being a champion of their vision and their culture and their opportunity. And they know how to structure even down to the very offer of how they
Mhm.
offer the position
Yeah.
in such a way that top tier talent, especially nowadays, as we were just saying, looks at that and
Mhm.
consistently goes, I would choose that over what I'm doing right now or any other job opportunities I'm looking at any day, even
Yeah.
if there's less job security as an
Yeah.
entrepreneurial company. They
Yeah.
don't have the big benefits package. I
Just
would choose
it's
that
way more
because,
exciting,
yeah,
right? And more interesting. I mean, great people, talented people, they look for challenges, they look for ways to stretch their skill sets, to be around other engaging, interesting, passionate people. And big companies, a lot of times that's hard to find, right? So it's like
mm,
very vanilla, very bland, and also many times not anything but that, right? Like there a lot of bunch of really unhappy, bored people at their job. So that's really, not inspiring, right? If I'm great, if I'm an A player, right? Um, One thing, and I'm sure again you would get to this, but so I like, okay, so we sell you're selling the vision, you're selling the mission and why we're here, and just how exciting and interesting this can be to be part of this growing entrepreneurial type of business. And it doesn't stop there. And I love how you brought out, it comes down to even the offer, and then it goes to the onboarding and training or performance
100%.
management piece of it. It never stops, right? Like you don't sign up a customer and then just ignore them, right? You have some sort of client success or customer service. You have some structure for keeping your customers engaged so they keep buying from you, whether you're in a
Mm,
subscription or a consulting business or even a retail business. Like, how do I get them to come back and buy more ice cream from me? Like, I got to do something to wow them to say, yeah, they're coming back, right? Well, that same thing goes in for, right, once you hire them.
mm,
And the onboarding piece is really important, right? It's same like with the offer, whatever taste you leave in their mouth during like that, post interview mode through offer through onboarding can make a huge difference on whether that person sticks, right? Because
mm.
you screw up one of those steps or you make a terrible misstep in there, that person's going to regret making that decision real quick, and usually that ends pretty quickly if that happens, right?
Very true, man. The all the way from, you know, initial ad or connection or outreach, recruiting outreach,
Mm-hmm.
all the way through onboarding, training, and just managing,
Yeah.
having that vision be consistently dripped, and having the, like you said, the systems to actually empower that kind of person to win is
Yeah.
so critical, right?
Yeah.
And I think about, how many entrepreneurs are frustrated with their team's performance, and then you look at it and it's like, in some cases they have great people, right? And
Yeah.
sure, there's things that could be optimized, but they're not empowered. There isn't an environment of empowerment. And I think this is especially, just since we were on the remote boat just a minute ago, I think
Mm-hmm.
this has been especially difficult for leaders who have transitioned from in person to remote,
Mm-hmm.
where, kind of the old adage of like manage by walking around was very
Mm-hmm.
true. And there was some
Formal.
informal but
Yeah.
very effective cultural systems that were inherent and native, where how we communicate and how we build trust and how we build equity and how we keep momentum and how we keep things moving forward, that now in a remote world these leaders are trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's important to put attention to that. Yeah.
You really have to be a lot more intentional in a remote world or a hybrid or a flex world. I mean, whatever it is, again, I'm I know I'm a pretty big advocate of going remote, but I think a flex, is equally as great. So whatever it is, you just have to be a lot more intentional. I used to say this in the beginning of the pandemic, when we were going through remote stuff. And in fact, we talked about EOS and scaling up and some of these other business systems. And, I'd studied or been exposed. And, I really half-assed all that stuff, honestly, prior to, COVID. And I knew as soon as COVID hit, right, we sent everybody home, we're going home. It wasn't that difficult from a tech perspective, but, we immediately, I was like, I got to put EOS into place. Like, we just did it that day. Like, it was like, whatever, March 26th or something. Like the next day, we fully implemented EOS, at least from a communication structure process, right? And then, we made our own flavor about that. So it just became very, very intentional about how we connected with each other one-on-one as a group and how we communicated ideas and information. And we put a lot of structure into there, and it's never been better. I wish I would have done it when I was sitting in the office with everybody. Right?
Don't we all, man? The lessons we learn in retrospect.
Whether you go that way, my point, I guess, is whether you go that way or not is the intentionality, in structure. Because I think, as you mentioned, there is this native kind of, natural way that culture is created, and it works, and it does work. But we can do even better, even if we are in that in person, by being more intentional and more structured in how we do it, right? So that's kind of my biggest takeaway from COVID, from operations standpoint. But so I love this stuff. One other thing, I'm interested in your opinion on this. So I like the art piece, and actually that's an interesting way of bringing it up, because I'm definitely a systems and a process guy. Like we're dealing with hiring, which is such a, human to human nuanced thing, right? Where yes, we can put processes and systems in place all day long. But there are aspects to it. Like, I don't know, I can teach you how to write a good job ad, but I can't automate that, right? Like I can't, there's no software that will just make all of a sudden spit out an amazing job ad for you, right? There is no software system that's going to interview somebody for you, right? Like, yes, I can do one-way video interviews. I can check references automatically. I can give you behavioral aptitude, skill-based assessments. All of those are forms of assessment, right? And they're all very, very helpful in this process, but I can't automate the interview, right? And that is an art, right? How do you teach people how to become artists when it comes to interviewing?
Yeah, man. Truth be told, a lot of our clients have us do most of the heavy lifting of that for them, because as an entrepreneur,
you outsource it.
Yeah, they outsource it. And well, I don't
that's
say
a fair
that just
enough
to be
way
like,
to do
hey,
it.
you should come work with us or come work with Fletcher, because I know you guys do some really cool things in that regard too. But I think one of the keys is, I would just say that one of the keys to nailing the art form of hiring is building a culture that is convicted and obsessed about your vision and is almost like wants to protect it, right? So there's like this duality to it, where it's like you're throwing out this wide net of vision, right? And you're hopefully getting the very best people into your funnel. Yeah. And then you're screening scientifically the heck out of them.
Yeah.
And I think some of this is like, I think the biggest thing that I could impart to the entrepreneur is, number one, in the hiring process, the parts that you don't need to be involved in are delegatable. If you have a culture where other people actually want to protect what you're doing, the assessments and the references and all that stuff, the part that you can't delegate is actually sitting down with someone.
Yeah.
Sharing your vision, sharing your culture, looking that person in the eye and reading them. Right. and reading them. And most entrepreneurs are actually better at this than they think they are. They just don't take the time to do it because many times they're hiring out of desperation instead of vision. It's like, oh, I need this role. Oh, I need this person. And then you kind of compromise versus going like, when I do an interview with someone, I'm almost, the way I'm communicating is kind of like, you're either one of us or you're not.
Yeah.
And if you're one of us, you're going to get fired up when I throw these challenges in front of you and talk about how high performing our culture is and our vision and all things we're going to achieve. And if you're not one of us, you're going to be sitting over there going like, what the heck is this guy talking about?
Well, they're going to opt out. Hopefully,
sounds like, way too much work. And, like you guys just super intense and and it's pretty easy because I'm so passionate and convicted, and our team's so passionate and convicted about our vision and culture. We just repel in our process people who are not cultural and vision fits and who aren't high performing. And we attract people who are, and those people are like, I want to work here. Right? Like and
they're like, this is interesting. I want this challenge. I'm not running away from it. I'm embracing it and I want more of it. Yeah. Well, I think that's really good. And, I think, I always encourage people, this is my take on it, but is practice, I think you got to do it. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, right, and visionaries, we're too busy. And yes, look, hey, if you can outsource it, or you can outsource at least, you can definitely outsource pieces of it, components of it, a lot of the tactile and the process and managing the pipelines and things like that easily. But, I think when it comes to interviewing, whether it be how you share that vision, like you said, or how you interview, because I still believe, I'm kind of an advocate. Like, I think, especially in an entrepreneurial business, like the owner's probably going to be interviewing most hires, especially key hires.
Oh yeah. Before you make the hire, you should be in at least one interview.
Yeah,
I agree with
that. But I think nobody teaches us how to interview, right? Even in business school, or even if you have an HR emphasis, no one's taught how to interview. We learn, or we just sort of like wing it, right? And we get some practice winging it, basically, right, throughout our careers. But I think once you find an intentional way of doing it, and that is two sides, it's that selling the vision, but there's also the actual, I need to get to know you and like ask you questions and get to like the truth of you, the candidate, the individual, following some, really simple best practices there, but then practicing and taking that time. I think, it takes less time than you think, but, I think putting 10 or 20 hours of practice in, it doesn't happen in a week, it happens over a month or two, I think is really, really important, skill set. And I think just helps become more intentional. And then you do it once or twice, you go through this process once or twice, then it becomes more natural. And then it's kind of like riding a bike, right? Gets easier. So I don't know. I always encourage entrepreneurs practice.
That's good.
Yeah. So, as we come to an end here, we haven't really had a chance to talk much about Unleash CEO. It sounds like an interesting organization. Actually, guys, I know nothing about it other than just the tiny little bit of research I got to do prior to talking to Richard. So I get to ask from a real place of genuine curiosity. Tell us about this.
Yeah, man. So Unleash CEO, as I said, was kind of born out of the desire to fill two key needs that the entrepreneur faces. One is how to actually recruit and train a entrepreneurial leadership team, right? So we come alongside of our clients and help them do just that. We have a world-class in-house recruiting team. And what we focus on is really developing the art side of how we're going to sell this entrepreneurial company and opportunity to the very best management and leadership talent and bring them in, not for some hefty corporate paycheck, but because of the vision, the impact, and the growth potential, and structure the deal where it's actually affordable for the entrepreneur, but also the person coming in who's really skilled. If they have the ability to drive efficiency, profitability, and growth, right?
So
they will be compensated.
Putting some good incentive plans,
right? Profit sharing, we bonus structures, those sorts of things in place. So we help them, entrepreneurs recruit and train a leadership team without kind of going bankrupt in the short term, so that they can actually scale over, the next 3 to 5 years the way that they want to, and get back their time freedom. The other side of what we do, and this is kind of a new thing that I'm really excited about, is we've really started to build a worldwide, world-class network of people who are ambitious, skilled leaders and managers with a lot of experience in that realm, and then started to really train them in our philosophy of how to lead and manage remote teams specifically. And so we've started building kind of this network of COOs, integrators, CFOs in various industries and verticals, who already have the industry knowledge and the experience and those sorts of things, but now are actually getting trained in the nuance of how to lead and manage remote teams that actually free up the entrepreneur's time to stay focused on growth. And so that's one of the initiatives that I'm most excited about that we've been building over the last year. And it's been so cool to start to see this, is, as you said, the supply and demand issue. Like we just want to be part of, finding those people who are part of the supply, as you said, and then really pairing and matchmaking them with the right entrepreneurial profile, the right entrepreneur. And together, man, they can achieve so much. So many, entrepreneurial explosions, I believe, of growth will happen when that pairing is right.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we struggle to, articulate or communicate the vision of the company, particularly in the hiring process. So it's really needed. And definitely many don't have the time or the expertise to master the hiring process. So being able to outsource that to somebody who really gets it, I think is great, and can help walk people through some of those processes. And and advocating for remote workforce, I think again is a huge competitive advantage that many entrepreneurs, I think, have discovered during COVID, but maybe some need to remember or rediscover, or gain greater traction on, and it can be done. Oh my gosh, it can be done. So definitely encourage folks who are on the fence about that, trying to figure it out, especially if you're struggling for talent, to really reconsider your flex working environments, because it is, I mean, if I had to do just one thing to solve the problem, I'd just do that. Like if you did nothing else, just create a more flexible remote working environment, you automatically are going to open up a door to more better talent. I mean, still you got to do other things, but if you just did that one thing, really helps. But well, hey, Richard, it's been great. So I always end this with, what is like one or two things that people could do tomorrow? I gave you, I stole the remote one from you. You shared that with us, but what would be a couple other things that just easy things that you could do tomorrow that would help you improve your chances of building that entrepreneurial executive team?
Number one, draw that tic-tac-toe square I talked about earlier. Not quite tic-tac-toe, but get those 4 quadrants. Find out what your superpower is, what you love doing or great at, and find out the things that you don't love and you're not great at, right? That'd be number one. I would really do some thinking time on like, what could our business achieve over the next year if I focused on my superpower and that top left quadrant, and if I actually delegated these constraints in the bottom right corner. I think for most entrepreneurs, if they actually are open and honest with themselves and are willing to confront those weaknesses head on, it's the first step to breakthrough and growth and more time freedom for them and the people they love. The second thing I would recommend that, they do is really take some time. This is the best time to, as you look ahead to the next year, to revisit your vision and really ask, why do we exist as a company? And what do I see for the future of this company? Where are we headed? Right? Who are we here? Why do we exist? And where are we headed? And really just take time, get back into a creative space as an entrepreneur and get that documented, because, regardless of whether you work with our team or somebody else, or you just handle it in-house, I just cannot stress how much that is a competitive advantage for you in hiring if you'll actually weaponize, as I say, your vision and then wield it, use it. It's the number one thing you can do to take what is your greatest disadvantage and turn it into your greatest competitive advantage in hiring.
I love it. I know I've redone my mission and vision 5 times over the last 8 years. I'm like, it's not quite good enough. I'm like, keep working on this thing, but it keeps you sharp, right? Keeps you thinking about it and on point, right? So I love it. Well, how do we find you, Richard?
Yeah, great. If you want, you can check us out on YouTube. Just search the Unleashed CEO Show. We're releasing on a weekly basis starting in 2022, kind of weekly short, compact videos and interviews along with worksheets that really focus on how do you build this leadership and management team that actually frees you up to be the CEO of your company. So you can check us out there. You can also just go to unleashed.ceo. That's our website. There's no .com, just unleashed.ceo, and find out a little bit more about our team, what we do. And we have some free resources available for download on there on building that self-managing team we talked about.
And of course, all your info will be tagged and linked here to our page here and shared on all our socials and everything as we distribute this. So if you're checking this out on any platform, you should be able to find the links here. So thank you very much for your time, Richard. It was great talking to you today.
It was such a pleasure, Fletcher. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we'll end it here, and just on a side note, it was great. It really was great talking to you. But no, very interesting. So you guys are focused on the headhunting and the search piece of it, but you're kind of really doing the consulting piece to set people up for success. So when you go out and do the work for them, huh?
Yeah, the way we think about it is we talked about that board of advisors role. So like in a sense, we step in as an informal board of advisors to advise on what it looks like to recruit, train, and empower a leadership and management team for the entrepreneur. And then we have our in-house recruiting team actually handle the heavy lifting of doing that. So that's kind of the we help
like
them.
A 1-2 punch.
Yeah, 1-2 punch. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, that's kind of our place and our positioning, what we do. I am really excited though about in 2022, we're starting to see some really cool things happen with our kind of this incubator we're starting to build, not for entrepreneurs, but for entrepreneurial leaders and managers who are remote. And that's something that, I think
are you building that just through your day-to-day recruiting activities? You're identifying somebody, maybe they don't get placed, but they go into the pool. You say, like, you tag them like, hey, this guy maybe not a fit for what I'm dealing with right now, but I'm going to put them into the pool for future reference, but then nurturing a relationship with them.
That's been part of our process up to this point. And then we have a platform for, where